Hello, everybody, and how are you? I'm really excited to be here because for about half an hour, it looked like I wasn't going to be here because why? Because my computer decided it had a whole lot of things it wanted to update. I know they say check that all your things have been updated before you're getting ready when you're getting ready to stream, but when you've been doing something like have lunch and you come back and you're checking your computer just to get ready for streaming, and everything takes about 5 times as long as it's meant to just to open, it's like there's something strange going on. And then I discovered my browser wanted to update, and I discovered that my antivirus was doing a major update, which I was able to put a pause on so I can do it again afterwards. Yeah, so there you go. I'm here, and hopefully you are too. That's great. Wonderful. Now, it is Friday. I am looking for my... Let's see if I can get it to look a little bit sparklier. Kind of works. My webcam doesn't autofocus, so at least light-wise I was getting it so it wasn't being distracted by the other thing. So, formal Friday, because we're not really in lockdown now, but it's still there's a lot of people who are still home-based. I'm always home-based, but hey, any excuse to wear your little tiara. Hilary Barry can wear hers on Fridays, why can't I? So there you go. Mind you, hers is gorgeous. Looks very royal. Don't think it'd be not the sort of thing you'd pick up down at the gold coin shop anyway. Right, so here we are, and how are you? And what else? Sorry, I'm opening up my phone to see what it's doing. No, I don't want you to show me my old story that I was already reading. My phone. I have my phone open next to me when I'm streaming so that I can just keep an eye on some things on my channel, not anywhere else. There you go. That's showing what it's meant to show. Put that there. Make sure the sound is turned off so you don't have to listen to it making weird noises or me talking to me through my microphone and my phone, which is really rather strange. Anyway, so now we're going to unlock the iPad mini, first generation, hand-me-down. Great. If you can find a way to reuse things rather than buy new for a lot of your stuff, you do make a big difference to how the world is coping with stuff. So there you go. We are going to be reading 5 Children and It by Edith Nesbit. Now, we've had several books by her already, The Railway Children and then the Bastable series, this series about the Bastable children. That was the Treasure Seekers, and one of their books is called The Would-Be Goods, and they have a lot of trouble with trying to do things to be helpful, but because of their perception of the world and the sort of children that they are, usually it goes rather awry and somebody gets into trouble. Anyway, so if you're new here, hi, I'm Jev. I read old-fashioned children's stories, and I don't really care what you think of me, which is great. Live like that. It makes life a lot more fun and takes a lot of pressure off. I read old-fashioned children's stories because it's great to actually get out of the headspace that you are living day to day in and expand your brain, expand your mind, expand your perceptions of the world and the way other people are by listening to stories from other times and places. So I live in New Zealand, commonly nicknamed NZ, because that's why we say the letter Z at the beginning of Zealand. And most of the children's books I read are old-fashioned children's books that have been written by authors who are based in England, specifically England, some of them a little bit further afield, like Scotland. I do have some books from Canada, Australia. I just read one from New Zealand, but generally they're old books, and they're the sort of books that I grew up reading, but so did my parents and my grandparents. I grew up reading books that my grandparents had read. There you go, old-fashioned books. And I found that I had an understanding of other places and times that most other children didn't have, even when we were later on in school. at an older age. I had an understanding of things that a lot of others didn't, and I can only put that down to having secondhand experience of a lot of imaginary, yes, but different times and places, different uses of language. All of those things help us to broaden our outlook on life, to be more sympathetic to others, to be more understanding of the fact that not everybody comes from the same place that we do, socially, historically, financially, all of those other things. And I really think that we could do with a lot more of that sort of attitude towards other people in day-to-day life. And also it's just good fun to read something that isn't caught up in the troubles and stresses and everything that are around you in your daily life, and to have something else to listen to. Now, if you wanted a short description, I read books, old-fashioned children's books, a little bit like listening to an audiobook, except they're not polished. They're not beautifully spoken with no background noises, because I've got a chimney next to my office, and where our house is on the ridge, so we get the sound of the wind comes through the chimney and into my microphone. Or if it's raining or hailing, you hear it on the roof, which is right above me. I have my hand on the roof right now, on the underside of the roof, on the ceiling. So sometimes you'll hear hard rain on the chimney, and also on the roof. My story reading is more like old-fashioned bedtime stories, where somebody interrupts mum to find out what's going on, or somebody prods somebody else and mum says, stop that, you just sit still and listen, or here, play with this while you're listening, to keep your hands busy. So that's what it's like. But generally what I've found out is that a lot of my listeners are actually adults, not children. And that's fine. If you are someone who needs something to listen to while you're working, and that can be paid work or work based from home or voluntary, it doesn't matter. I don't care what sort of work it is. If you are somebody who needs something with voices in the background when you're studying, if you're studying numbers or things like that, and you like to have a little bit of your brain balanced out with words, then here we go. You can listen to these. I've got lots of different friends who actually listen purely for those reasons, just to have something going on in the background. Plus also, I make stupid mistakes. I read words funny. Sometimes I get lost halfway through a line, and that's lots of fun too. And if you are a Twitch aficionado and you're very familiar with the systems and you're logged in, you're most welcome to make ridiculous clips of the different stupid stuff that I do. And I'll probably save them and compile them into a bloopers type reel at some stage. That would be quite fun to do. So anyway, enough talking. I'm going to get going. And the intro for getting going is, have you got your water? Stay hydrated. Have you got a snack to eat, so you don't get too hungry? Oh, that's a weird looking one. It's actually a real banana, and it's proper yellow, not that weird look. Obviously my green screen adaptation is seeing it. It's strange. So, something to drink, something to eat. I've also got my coffee, the rest of it. And somewhere comfortable to sit if you can. We shall carry on with reading. So here we go. 5 Children and It by Edith E. Nesbit. Chapter 2, because we started last time. Golden Guineas. Anthea woke in the morning from a very real sort of dream in which she was walking in the zoological gardens on a pouring wet day without an umbrella. These days we would call that the zoo. They used to be called the zoological gardens. There you go. The animals seemed desperately unhappy because of the rain and were all growling gloomily. When she awoke, both the growling and the rain went on just the same. The growling was the heavy, regular breathing of her sister Jane, who had a slight cold and was still asleep. The rain fell in slow drops onto Anthea's face from the wet corner of a bath towel, out of which her brother Robert was gently squeezing the water to wake her up, as he now explained. "Oh, drop it," she said rather crossly. So he did, for he was not a brutal brother, though very ingenious in apple pie beds, booby traps, original methods of awakening sleeping relatives, and the other little accomplishments which make home happy, in his view. Apple pie beds, that's where you actually, it's kind of like booby trapping someone's bed. Sometimes it will be short sheeting it. That's where you take the top sheet, and instead of having the bottom sheet and then the top sheet with the blankets, you actually take your top sheet and loop it round. So when they go to get in, their feet won't go down any further. Works okay for kids, not so good for adults because some of them are strong enough to actually put their feet right through the sheet. And here you've got Robert dripping water from a towel onto Anthea's head. We shall carry on. I had such a funny dream, Anthea began. So did I, said Jane, waking suddenly and without warning. I dreamed we found a sand fairy in the gravel pits, and it said it was a Samoyed, and we might have a new wish every day, and... But that's what I dreamed, said Robert. I was just going to tell you, and we had the first wish directly it said so. And I dreamt you girls were donkeys enough to ask for us all to be beautiful as day, and we jolly well were, and it was perfectly beastly. But can different people all dream the same thing, said Anthea, sitting up in bed, because I dreamt all that as well as about the zoo and the rain. And Baby didn't know us in my dream, and the servants shut us out of the house because the radiantness of our beauty was such a complete disguise, and the voice of the eldest brother sounded from across the landing. Come on, Robert, it said, you'll be late for breakfast again, unless you mean to shirk your bath as you did on Tuesday. I say, come here a second, Robert replied. I didn't shirk it. I had it after brekker in Father's dressing room because ours was emptied away. It was emptied away because he didn't do it before breakfast. Cyril appeared in the doorway, partially clothed. Look here, said Anthea. We've all had such an odd dream. We've all dreamt we found a sand fairy. Her voice died away before Cyril's contemptuous glance. Dream, he said. You little sillies. It's true. I tell you, it all happened. That's why I'm so keen on being down early. We'll go up there directly after brekker and have another wish. Only we'll make up our minds solid before we go what it is we want to do, and no one must ask for anything unless the others agree first. No more peerless beauties for this child, thank you, not if I know it. The other three dressed, with their mouths open. If all that dream about the sand fairy was real, this real dressing seemed very like a dream, the girls thought. So, for those of you new to the story today, the first chapter of the book is what we read last time, and that's when that happened. That was when they discovered they were digging in the gravel pit. They've moved to a new house, well, a house out in the country, and they were digging in the gravel pit and discovered the sand fairy. And so today's chapter starts with them actually thinking it was all a dream because it was so unusual. Sorry, my throat's dry. I'm having a drink. Right, carrying on. Jane felt that Cyril was right, but Anthea was not sure till after they had seen Martha and heard her full and plain reminders about their naughty conduct the day before. Then Anthea was sure. Because, said she, servants never dream anything but the things in the dream book, like snakes and oysters going to a wedding. That means a funeral, and snakes are a false female friend and oysters are babies. Strange. Oh, the dream book, yes, dream interpretation. Talking of babies, said Cyril, where's the lamb? That's one of the nicknames they have for their baby brother, I think it is. Martha's going to take him to Rochester to see her cousins. So, yes, they are in Kent. Rochester is in Kent. They're out in the country in Kent. Mother said she might. She's dressing him now, said Jane, in his very best coat and hat. Bread and butter, please. She seems to like taking him too, said Robert in a tone of wonder. Servants do like taking babies to see their relations, Cyril said. I've noticed it before, especially in their best clothes. I expect they pretend they're their own babies and that they're not servants at all but married to noble dukes of high degree, and they say the babies are the little dukes and duchesses, Jane suggested dreamily, taking more marmalade. I expect that's what Martha will say to her cousin. She'll enjoy herself most frightfully. She won't enjoy herself most frightfully carrying our infant duke to Rochester, said Robert. Not if she's anything like me, she won't. Fancy walking to Rochester with the lamb on your back, said Cyril in full agreement. She's gone by the carrier's cart, said Jane. Let's see them off, then we shall have done a polite and kindly act, and we shall be quite sure we've got rid of them for the day. I'm getting flashbacks to the would-be-goods. Having done a polite and kindly act. That was the intro to lots of trouble and misadventures with those children. Different set of children. Oh, and this book is another one that's in a series of 3. Sorry, it's rather warm here in New Zealand, so just moving my hair out of the way because it's uncomfortably hot and tickly, itching. Carrying on. So they did. Oh, and by the way, that reference to carrying the lamb, their baby brother is rather sturdy, so it's hard work carrying him. Martha wore her Sunday dress of 2 shades of purple, so tight in the chest that it made her stoop, and her blue hat with the pink cornflowers and white ribbon. She had a yellow lace collar with a green bow. That's very bright. And the lamb had indeed his very best cream-coloured silk coat and hat. It was a smart party that the carrier's cart picked up at the crossroads. When its white tilt and red wheels had slowly vanished in a swirl of chalk dust, "And now for the Samoyed," said Cyril, and off they went. As they went, they decided on the wish they would ask for. Although they were all in a great hurry, they did not try to climb down the sides of the gravel pit, but went round by the safe lower road as if they had been carts. That was one of the discussions last time, is that the gravel pit is a little bit dangerous if you try to climb down the side. It has sand and gravel and chalk, I think, limestone, something like that. Yeah, not great. The sides collapse if you climb down them too. And if they don't, it's quite a drop. As if they had been carts, they had made a ring of stones round the place where the sand fairy had disappeared, so they easily found the spot. The sun was burning and bright, and the sky was deep blue, without a cloud. The sand was very hot to touch. "Oh, suppose it's only a dream after all," Robert said, as the boys uncovered their spades from the sand heap where they had buried them, and begun to dig. "Suppose you were a sensible chap," said Cyril. "One's quite as likely as the other." "Suppose you kept a civil tongue in your head," Robert snapped. Oh dear, they're starting to argue. And often when people bicker, they make statements about wishing something. Oh, what's going to happen? We'll find out. "Suppose we girls take a turn," said Jane, laughing. "You boys seem to be getting very warm." "Suppose you don't come putting your silly oar in," said Robert, who was now warm indeed. "We won't," said Anthea quickly. "Robert, dear, don't be so grumpy. We won't say a word. You shall be the one to speak to the fairy and tell him what we've decided to wish for. You'll say it much better than we shall." "Suppose you drop being a little humbug," said Robert, but not crossly. "Look out, dig with your hands now." So they did, and presently uncovered the spider-shaped brown hairy body, long arms and legs, bat's ears, and snail's eyes of the sand fairy himself. Everyone drew a deep breath of satisfaction, for now, of course, it couldn't have been a dream. The Samoyed sat up and shook the sand out of its fur. "How's your left whisker this morning?" said Anthea politely. "Nothing to boast of," said it. "It had rather a restless night, but thank you for asking." They get damaged by water, and he'd got a drip of water on it once, years ago. So it gets uncomfortable. "I say," said Robert, "do you feel up to giving wishes today? Because we very much want an extra besides the regular one. The extra's a very little one," he added reassuringly. "Humph," said the sand fairy. If you read the story aloud, please pronounce humph exactly as it's spelt, for that's how he said it. Humph, which I didn't. But there you go. Humph, he said. "Do you know, until I heard you being disagreeable to each other just over my head, and so loud too, I really quite thought I had dreamed you all. I do have very odd dreams sometimes." "Do you?" Jane hurried to say, so as to get away from the subject of disagreeableness. "I wish," she added politely. "Oh no." "I wish," she added politely, "you'd tell us about your dreams. They must be awfully interesting." "Is that the day's wish?" said the sand fairy, yawning. Cyril muttered something about just like a girl, and the rest stood silent. If they said yes, then goodbye to the other wishes they had decided to ask for. If they said no, it would be very rude, and they had all been taught manners, and had learnt a little too, which is not at all the same thing. A sigh of relief broke from all lips when the Sand Fairy said, "If I do, I shan't have enough strength to give you a second wish, not even good tempers or common sense or manners or little things like that." "We don't want you to put yourself out at all about these things. We can manage them quite well ourselves," said Cyril eagerly, while the others looked guiltily at each other and wished the fairy would not keep all on about good tempers, but give them one good scolding if it wanted to, and then have done with it. "Well," said the Psammead, putting out his long snail's eyes so suddenly that one of them nearly went into the round boy's eye of Robert. "Let's have the little wish first," said the Psammead. "We don't want the servants to notice the gifts you give us." "Are kind enough to give us," said Anthea in a whisper. "Are kind enough to give us, I mean," said Robert. The fairy swelled himself out a bit, let his breath go, and said, "I've done that for you. It's quite easy. People don't notice things much anyway. What's the next wish?" "We want," said Robert slowly, "to be rich beyond the dreams of something or other." "Avarice," said Jane. "So it is," said the fairy unexpectedly, "but it won't do you much good. That's one comfort." It muttered to itself, "Come, I can't go beyond dreams, you know. How much do you want, and will you have it in gold or notes?" "Gold, please, and millions of it." "This gravel pit full enough?" said the fairy in an offhand manner. "Oh, yes. Then go out before I begin, or you'll be buried alive in it." It made its skinny arms so long and waved them so frighteningly that the children ran as hard as they could towards the road by which carts used to come to the gravel pits. Only Anthea had presence of mind enough to shout a timid, "Good morning, I hope your whisker will be better tomorrow," as she ran. On the road they turned and looked back, and they had to shut their eyes and open them very slowly, a little bit at a time, because the sight was too dazzling for their eyes to be able to bear. It was something like trying to look at the sun at high noon on Midsummer Day. For the whole of the sand pit was full, right up to the very top, with new shining gold pieces, and all the little bank martins' little front doors were covered out of sight. Where the road for carts wound into the gravel pit, the gold lay in heaps, like stones lie by the roadside, and a great bank of shining gold shelved down from where it lay flat and smooth between the tall sides of the gravel pit. And all the gleaming heaps was minted gold, and on the sides and edges of these countless coins the midday sun shone and sparkled and glowed and gleamed, till the quarry looked like the mouth of a smelting furnace, or one of the fairy halls that you see sometimes in the sky at sunset. The children stood with their mouths open, and no one said a word. At last Robert stooped and picked up one of the loose coins from the edge of the heap by the cart road, and looked at it. He looked on both sides, then he said in a low voice, quite different to his own, "It's not sovereigns," which were a valuable coin from the era of this story. "It's gold anyway," said Cyril, and now they all began to talk at once. They all picked up the golden treasure by handfuls and let it run through their fingers like water, and the chink it made as it fell was wonderful music. At first they quite forgot to think of spending the money. It was so nice to play with. Jane sat down between two heaps of gold, and Robert began to bury her, as you bury your father in the sand when you are at the seaside, and he has gone to sleep on the beach with his newspaper over his face. But Jane was not half buried before she cried out, "Oh, stop! It's too heavy. It hurts." Robert said, "Bosh," and went on. "Let me out, I tell you," cried Jane, and was taken out, very white and trembling a little. "You've no idea what it's like," said she. "It's like stones on you, or like chains." "Look here," said Cyril. "If this is to do us any good, it's no good our staying gasping at it like this. Let's fill our pockets and go and buy things. Don't you forget it won't last after sunset." "I wish we'd asked the Psammead why things don't turn to stone. Perhaps this will. I'll tell you what, there's a pony and cart in the village." "Do you want to buy that?" asked Jane. "No, silly, we'll hire it. and then we'll go to Rochester and buy heaps and heaps of things. Look here, let's each take as much as we can carry. But it's not sovereigns. They've got a man's head on one side and a thing like the ace of spades on the other. Fill your pockets with it, I tell you, and come along. We can talk as we go if you must talk. Cyril sat down and began to fill his pockets. You made fun of me for getting father to have 9 pockets in my suit, said he. But now you see. They did, for when Cyril had filled his 9 pockets and his handkerchief and the space between himself and his shirt front with the gold coins, he had to stand up, but he staggered and had to sit down again in a hurry. Throw out some of the cargo, said Robert. You'll sink the ship, old chap. That comes of 9 pockets. And Cyril had to do so. Then they set off to walk to the village. It was more than a mile, and the road was very dusty indeed, and the sun seemed to get hotter and hotter, and the gold in their pockets got heavier and heavier. It was Jane who said, I don't see how we're to spend it all. There must be thousands of pounds amongst the lot of us. I'm going to leave some of mine behind this stump in the hedge, and directly we get to the village we'll buy some biscuits. I know it's long past dinner time. She took out a handful or 2 of gold and hid it in the hollows of an old hornbeam. How round and yellow they are, she said. Don't you wish they were made of gingerbread and we were going to eat them? Well, they're not, and we're not, said Cyril. Come on. But they came on heavily and wearily. Before they reached the village, more than one stump in the hedge concealed its little hoard of hidden treasure. Yet they reached the village with about 1,200 guineas worth in their pockets. That's a lot. But in spite of this inside wealth, they looked quite ordinary outside, and no one would have thought they could have more than a half-crown each at the outside. The haze of heat, the blue of the wood smoke, made a sort of dim, misty cloud over the red roofs of the village. The 4 sat down heavily on the first bench to which they came. It happened to be outside the Blue Boar Inn. Here's Cyril trying to get up. He staggered and had to sit down. There he is. He's looking rather plump in the middle because he's got his coins under his shirt. They were sitting outside the Blue Boar Inn. It was decided that Cyril should go into the Blue Boar and ask for ginger beer because, as Anthea said, it was not wrong for men to go into beer saloons, only for children. And Cyril is nearer being a man than us because he is the eldest. And so he went. The others sat in the sun and waited. Oh, how hot it is, said Robert. Dogs put their tongues out when they're hot. I wonder if it would call us at all to put out ours. We might try, Jane said, and they all put their tongues out as far as ever they could go, so that it quite stretched their throats, but it only seemed to make them thirstier than ever, besides annoying everyone who went by. So they took their tongues in again, just as Cyril came back with ginger beer. I had to pay for it out of my own money, he said. The money I was going to buy rabbits with. They wouldn't change the gold, and when I pulled out a handful, the man just laughed and said it was card counters, and I got some sponge cakes too, out of a glass jar on the bar counter, and some biscuits with caraways in. The sponge cakes were both soft and dry, and the biscuits were dry too, and yet soft, which biscuits ought not to be, but the ginger beer made up for everything. It's my turn now to try to buy something with the money, Anthea said. I'm next eldest. Where is the pony cart kept? It was at the Checkers. That's obviously another pub. And Anthea went in the back way to the yard because they all knew that little girls ought not to go into the bars of beer saloons. She came out, as she herself said, pleased but not proud. He'll be ready in a brace of shakes, he says, she remarked, and he's to have 1 sovereign or whatever it is to drive us into Rochester and back, besides waiting there till we've got everything we want. I think I managed very well. You think yourself jolly clever, I dare say, said Cyril moodily. How'd you do it? I wasn't jolly clever enough to go taking handfuls of money out of my pocket to make it seem cheap anyway, she retorted. I just found a young man doing something to a horse's legs with a sponge and pail, and I held out 1 sovereign and I said, Do you know what this is? He said no, and he'd call his father. And the old man came and he said it was a spade guinea, and he said it was my own to do with as I liked. And I said, yes. He said, was it my own to do with as I liked? And I said yes, and asked about the pony cart. And I said he could have the guinea if he'd drive us into Rochester. And his name is S. Crispin. And he said, righto. So a spade guinea, you could look that one up. Let's see if we can find out what these things really are. I might write that down, the words. Spade, guinea. Is something to look up. There you go. We might find out about some old currency that they used to have in that part of England. I don't know. We'll carry on. It was a new sensation to be driven in a smart pony trap along pretty country roads. It was very pleasant too, which is not always the case with new sensations. Quite apart from the beautiful plans of spending the money with which each child made as they went along, silently of course, and quite to oneself, for they felt it would never have done to let the old innkeeper hear them talk in the affluent sort of way in which they were thinking. The old man put them down by the bridge at their request. If you were going to buy a carriage and horses, where would you go? Asked Cyril, as if he were only asking for the sake of something to say. Billy Peasmarsh at the Saracen's Head, said the old man promptly, though all forbid I should recommend any man where it's a question of horses, no more than I'd take anybody else's recommending if I was a-buying one. But if your pa's thinking of a rig of any sort, there ain't a straighter man in Rochester nor civiller spoken than Billy, though I says it. There you go. Thank you, said Cyril. The Saracen's Head. Apparently everybody works from the pub of one sort or another. And now the children began to see one of the laws of nature turn upside down and stand on its head like an acrobat. Any grown-up person would tell you that money is hard to get and easy to spend, but the fairy money had been easy to get, and spending it was not only hard, it was almost impossible. The tradespeople of Rochester seemed to shrink to a tradesperson from the glittering fairy gold. Foreign money, they called it, for the most part. Foreign. To begin with, Anthea, who had had the misfortune to sit on her hat earlier in the day, wished to buy another one. She chose a very beautiful one trimmed with pink roses and the blue breasts of peacocks. It was marked in the window, Paris model, 3 guineas. I'm glad, she said, because it says guineas and not sovereigns, which we haven't got. But when she took 3 of the spade guineas in her hand, which was by this time rather dirty, owing to her not having put on gloves before going to the gravel pit, the black silk young lady in the shop looked very hard at her and went and whispered something to an older and uglier lady, also in black silk, and then they gave her back the money and said it was not current coin. I dare say it's good money, said Anthea, and it's my own. I dare say, said the lady, but it's not the kind of money that's fashionable now, and we don't care about taking it. I believe they think we've stolen it, said Anthea, rejoining the others in the street. If we had gloves, they wouldn't think we were so dishonest. It's my hands being so dirty that fills their minds with doubts. Just a moment. I really want to know. Don't you? I really want to know. Spade guinea. A guinea of George III's reign with a spade-shaped shield on the reverse. Just waiting for this to open up. It's on Wikipedia. No, it's also on the Royal Mint. Royalmint.com, in case you're wondering. Yes, he's a grumpy-looking man on one side, and then the other side, yeah, okay. And I'm sorry, I don't think I can get you an image of it to show you. That would be fun, wouldn't it? Let's see if I can this way. Open image in new tab. It's a bit small. See if I can get a bigger one. I just find it really intriguing. So I'm guessing that George III time period was quite a long time ago, and therefore it's considered to be so out of date that nobody wants to accept it. Although technically in a lot of countries, unless they've completely changed the currency because of issues with something, technically currency is still currency. They don't usually stop it being available. How odd. We're getting there. This is a better version of it. You can see the two side by side, and then I'll put them up here on the screen for you so you can see. Right, get those out of the way. I wonder if there's a reason why the Psammead gave them spade guineas. Probably. Right, here we go. Picture. Let's find a picture. I mean, on my computer. Sorry. You'd think I would have read this through beforehand to find out what these were. Hey. And here we go. This. I'll see if I can move myself out of the... Actually, I'll just turn my camera off for a minute. There you go. Those are the front and the back, obverse and reverse, I'm not sure, of a spade guinea. So there's George the Third on the left, and then there's the shield that is spade shaped on the right. And here I am. I'm back. There I am. Right. So that's George the Third, and that is why it gets called a spade guinea. That shield shape is because it looks a bit like a spade. Anyway, so that will do for now. We'll carry on reading. I'm sorry, it was bugging me. I really wanted to know if they were real, because some authors will completely make up everything in the background of the story, and other ones will use real things and put them into their imaginary story. Helps you to get a feel of a different author when you find out if they're like that. Anyway, so Anthea was thinking it was because her hands were dirty and she didn't have any gloves. So they chose a humble shop, and the girls bought cotton gloves, the kind at $1, but when they offered a guinea, the woman looked at it through her spectacles and said she had no change, and so the gloves had to be paid for out of Cyril's money, which he meant to buy rabbits with, and so had the green imitation crocodile skin purse at 9p, which had been bought at the same time. So you could pull your money out of it, I guess. They tried several more shops, the kind where you buy toys and perfume and silk handkerchiefs and books and fancy boxes of stationery and photographs of objects of interest in the vicinity. But nobody cared to change a guinea that day in Rochester, and as they went from shop to shop, they got dirtier and dirtier. And their hair got more and more untidy, and Jane slipped and fell down on a part of the road where a water cart had just gone by. Also, they got very hungry, but they found no one would give them anything to eat for their guineas. After trying 2 baker shops in vain, they became so hungry, perhaps from the smell of cake in the shops, as Cyril suggested, that they formed a plan of campaign in whispers and carried it out in desperation. They marched into a 3rd baker shop. Beale was his name, and before the people behind the counter could interfere, each child had seized 3 new-penny buns, clapped the 3 together between its dirty hands, and taken a big bite out of the triple sandwich. Then they stood at bay with the 12 buns in their hands and their mouths very full indeed. Dirty hands on food. The shocked baker's man bounded round the corner. "Here," said Cyril, speaking as distinctly as he could and holding out the guinea he got ready before entering the shops. "Pay yourself out of that." Mr. Beale snatched the coin, bit it, and put it in his pocket. Here he is. I really do need to get these other pictures up. There's Mr. Beale biting the coin, and there's the children all standing next to the counter, munching away on their buns. Off you go, he said, brief and stern like the man in the song. But the change, said Anthea, who had a saving mind. Change, said the man. I'll change you. Out you goes, and you may think yourselves lucky I don't send for the police to find out where you got it. In the gardens of the castle, the millionaires finished the buns, and though the curranty softness of these were delicious and acted like a charm in raising the spirits of the party, yet even the stoutest heart quailed at the thought of venturing to sound Mr. Billy Peasmarsh at the Saracen's Head on the subject of a horse and carriage. The boys would have given up on the idea, but Jane was always a hopeful child, and Anthea generally an obstinate one, and their earnestness prevailed. The whole party, by this time indescribably dirty, betook themselves to the Saracen's Head. The yard method of attack having been successful at the Chequers, was tried again here. Mr. Peasmarsh was in the yard, and Robert opened the business in these terms. They tell me you have a lot of horses and carriages to sell. It had been agreed that Robert should be the spokesman, because in books it is always gentlemen who buy horses and not ladies, and Cyril had had his go at the Blue Boar. They tell you true, young man, said Mr. Peasmarsh. He was a long, lean man with very blue eyes and a tight mouth and narrow lips. We should like to buy some, please, said Robert politely. I dare say you would. Will you show us a few, please, to choose from? Who are you a kiddin' of? Inquired Mr. Billy Peasmarsh. Was you sent here of a message? I tell you, said Robert, we want to buy some horses and carriages, and a man told us you were straight and civil spoken, but I shouldn't wonder if he was mistaken. Upon my sacred, said Mr. Peasmarsh, shall I trot the whole stable out for your honour's worship to see, or shall I send round to the bishop's to see if he's a nag or two to dispose of? Please do, said Robert. If it's not too much trouble, it would be very kind of you. Mr. Peasmarsh put his hands in his pockets and laughed, and they did not like the way he did it. Then he shouted, Willem! A stooping ostler appeared in the stable door. The ostler is the chap who catches the horses' bridles or reins when they come in from driving somewhere and holds them steady so that people can get out of the carriage and stuff like that. They look after the horses in that manner. Here, Willem, come and look at this here young duke. Wants to buy the whole stud, lock, stock and barrel, and ain't got tuppence in his pocket to bless himself with. I'll go bail, because the children are dirty, remember. Willem's eyes followed his master's pointing thumb with contemptuous interest. Them. Do he for sure, he said. But Robert spoke, though both the girls were now pulling at his jacket and begging him to come along. He spoke, and he was very angry. He said, I'm not a young duke, and I never pretended to be. And as for tuppence, what do you call this? And before the others could stop him, he had pulled out 2 fat handfuls of shining guineas and held them out for Mr. Peasmarsh to look at. He did look. He snatched one up in his finger and thumb. He bit it, and Jane expected him to say, The best horse in my stables is at your service. But the others knew better. Still, it was a blow, even to the most despondent, when he said shortly, Willem, shut the yard doors. And Willem grinned and went to shut them. Good afternoon, said Robert hastily. We shan't buy any horses now, whatever you say, and I hope it'll be a lesson to you. He had seen a little side gate open, and was moving towards it as he spoke, but Billy Peasmarsh put himself in the way. Not so fast, you young off-scouring, he said. Willem, fetch the police. Willem went. The children stood huddled together like frightened sheep, and Mr. Peasmarsh spoke to them till the police arrived. He said many things. Among other things, he said, Nice lot you are, ain't you, coming tempting honest men with your guineas. They are our guineas, said Cyril boldly. Oh, of course, we don't know all about that. No more we don't. Oh, no, of course not. And dragging little girls into it too. Here, I'll let the girls go if you come along to the police quiet. We won't be let go, said Jane heroically. Not without the boys. It's our money, just as much as theirs, you wicked old man. Where'd you get it then? Said the man, softening slightly, which was not at all what the boys expected when Jane began to call names. Jane cast a silent glance of agony at the others. Lost your tongue, eh? Got it fast enough when it was for calling names with. Come, speak up. Where'd you get it? Out of the gravel pit, said the truthful Jane. Next article, said the man. I tell you we did, Jane said. There's a fairy there all over brown fur with ears like a bat's and eyes like a snail's, and it gives you a wish a day and they all come true. Touched in the head, eh? Said the man in a low voice. All the more shame to you boys dragging the poor afflicted child into your sinful burglaries. She's not mad. It's true, said Anthea. There is a fairy. If I ever see him again, I'll wish for something for you. At least I would if vengeance wasn't wicked. So there. Lor lummy, said Billy Peasmarsh, if there ain't another of 'em on him. And now Willem came back with a spiteful grin on his face, and at his back a policeman, with whom Mr. Peasmarsh spoke long in a hoarse, earnest whisper. I dare say you're right, said the policeman at last. Anyway, I'll take him up on a charge of unlawful possession, pending inquiries, and the magistrate will deal with the case. Send the afflicted ones to a home, as likely as not, and the boys to a reformatory. Now then, come along, youngsters. No use making a fuss. You bring the girls along, Mr. Peasmarsh, sir, and I'll shepherd the boys. Speechless with rage and horror, the 4 children were driven along the streets of Rochester. Tears of anger and shame blinded them, so that when Robert ran right into a passer-by, he did not recognise her, till a well-known voice said, Well, if ever I did. Oh, Master Robert, what have you been a-doing of now? And another voice, quite as well-known, said, Benty, want to go own Benty? That's the nickname that the baby has for one of the girls, I think. They had run into Martha and the baby. And I'm not going to bother showing you that picture because it's so small. It won't, and with the screen being fuzzy. Martha behaved admirably. She refused to believe a word of the policeman's story or of Mr. Peasmarsh's either, even when they made Robert turn out his pockets in an archway and show the guineas. I don't see nothing, she said. You've gone out of your senses, you two. There ain't any gold there, only the poor child's hands all over dirt, like the very chimbly. Oh, that I should ever see the day. Remember, they asked the Psammead to make it so that the servants, the family servants, would not actually see what they'd wished for, so that they wouldn't have problems like they did the previous day with being as beautiful as the sun or the day or whatever it was, and the servants not recognising them. And the children thought this very noble of Martha, because they don't realise it's because of that. The children thought this very noble of Martha, even if rather wicked, till they remembered how the fairy had promised that the servants should never notice any of the fairy gifts. So, of course, Martha couldn't see the gold, and so was only speaking the truth, and that was quite right, of course, but not extra noble. It was getting dusk when they reached the police station. The policeman told his tale to an inspector, who sat in a large bare room, with a thing like a clumsy nursery fender at one end to put prisoners in. Robert wondered whether it was a cell or a dock. "Produce the coins, officer," said the inspector. "Turn out your pockets," said the constable. Cyril desperately plunged his hands in his pockets, stood still a moment, and then began to laugh, an odd sort of laugh that hurt and that felt much more like crying. His pockets were empty. So were the pockets of the others, for of course at sunset all the fairy gold had vanished away. "Turn out your pockets and stop that noise," said the inspector. Cyril turned out his pockets, every one of the 9 which enriched his suit, and every pocket was empty. "Well," said the inspector, "I don't know how they done it, artful little beggars. They walked in front of me the whole way so as for me to keep my eye on them and not to attract a crowd and obstruct the traffic. It is very remarkable," said the inspector, frowning. "If you've done a browbeating of the innocent children," said Martha, if you've finished doing it, I'll hire a private carriage and we'll drive home to their papa's mansion. You'll hear about this again, young man. I told you they hadn't any gold when you were pretending to see it in their poor, helpless hands. It's early in the day for a constable on duty not to be able to trust his eyes." In other words, he's been drinking. "As to the other one, the less said the better. He keeps the Saracen's Head and he knows best what his liquor's like." "Take them away, for goodness sake," said the inspector crossly. But as they left the police station, he said, "Now then," to the policeman and Mr. Peasmarsh, and he said it 20 times as crossly as he had spoken. to Martha. Here you go. He's sitting at the table and he's talking to the constable and Mr. Peasmarsh. He's having words with them about the fact that they're pretending because they're probably, in his mind, had too much to drink. Martha was as good as her word. She took them home in a very grand carriage because the carrier's cart had gone, and though she had stood by them so nobly with the police, she was so angry with them as soon as they were alone for traipsing into Rochester by themselves that none of them dared to mention the old man with the pony cart from the village who was waiting for them in Rochester. And so after one day of boundless wealth, the children found themselves sent to bed in deep disgrace and only enriched by 2 pairs of cotton gloves, dirty inside because of the state of the hands they had been put on to cover, an imitation crocodile skin purse, and 12 penny buns long since digested. The thing that troubled them most was the fear that the old gentleman's guinea might have disappeared at sunset with all the rest, so they went down to the village the next day to apologise for not meeting him in Rochester and to see. They found him very friendly. The guinea had not disappeared, and he had bored a hole in it and hung it on his watch chain. As for the guinea the baker took, the children felt they could not care whether it had vanished or not, which was not perhaps very honest, but on the other hand was not wholly unnatural. But afterwards this preyed on Anthea's mind, and at last she secretly sent 12 postage stamps by post to Mr. Beale, baker, Rochester. Inside she wrote, to pay for the buns. I hope the guinea did disappear, for that baker was really not at all a nice man. And besides, penny buns are 7 for 6pence in all really respectable shops. Yeah, sometimes stamps used to get used kind of like currency because people were still using stamps, and it would save them having to buy stamps. There you go. And that's the end of that chapter. How interesting. I wonder what the next one's going to bring. What else are they going to wish? I have a feeling that everything they wish for is probably going to have consequences that they have not considered. Do you know what I mean? That when you wish for something, it's not necessarily a good thing to have everything just randomly changed from what it normally is. It's actually better to work your way to something different. I'm not sure. We'll see what happens, won't we? Right. I am going to... What am I going to do? I meant to have this open on the other side. I had the wrong window open. Oh, that's right, because I was looking up spade sovereigns. No, spade guineas. There you go. I wonder if they were a coin that wasn't current in that region when it was actually in use. That's intriguing. Or if it was purely because people considered that the children must have stolen them for them to have something so valuable. Anyway, so we're between chapters. That means time for a drink. And then we shall carry on with the next chapter. I really want to have those pictures from the book that I can show you. I wonder if I can find some. Chat amongst yourselves while I have a look. Gutenberg. So this is where I get my books from. Project Gutenberg, which is, I'm going to give you the website. Gutenberg.org. And it's public domain books that are no longer stuck in copyright, and so therefore you can, as long as you're not having to pay for somebody having published it and printed it. I mean, those ones you have to pay for, obviously, normally at a bookshop or through Amazon or something. But digital copies of old books. Sorry, my typing is... I can do one or the other, words from my mouth or words from my fingers. It's a little bit weird. There's 2 versions of it, and I don't know what the difference are. We shall find out, shan't we? 5 children and it. 5 children and it. Okay, not that one, because that one has no images. We will have a look at this version and see if I can get you some pictures to show you while I'm reading. Good. I just have to find out where we got to. I wonder if I can actually do them directly from the website. We'll find out, shan't we? Let's try an experiment. I am going to try giving you there's a helicopter going overhead. I wonder what's up with that. See if it works by me putting the link in here instead of because I know with some things you can. We're testing the system, aren't we? We do that sometimes, just to confuse everybody. And let's go there. I can do it from a link. There you go. How's that? I didn't know that. Because normally you browse for an image on your computer to show here, such as this one. If I had it on my hard drive on my computer, there's a thing where you press the button and it says browse and it opens up a form of Windows Explorer on your computer or whatever the Mac version is, and then it takes you to it so that you can actually see what you're going to choose. But I just put the link in the text bar at the bottom and said okay for that. I didn't actually choose something from my computer, and it gave you that. Oh, that's a new thing. I'm just going to quickly see if I need to open up any others in this chapter, because then I can do that and show you. It's got quite a few pictures. Okay, right, that's the end of that chapter. Right, here we go. I'm going to carry on reading. We are reading chapter 3, Being Wanted. It's interesting. And I'll have one more mouthful of water before we carry on. Chapter 3, Being Wanted, and this is, we're reading 5 Children and It by E. Nesbit. The morning after the children had been the possessors of boundless wealth and had been unable to buy anything really useful or enjoyable with it except 2 pairs of cotton gloves, 12 penny buns, an imitation crocodile skin purse, and a ride in a pony cart, they awoke without any of the enthusiastic happiness which they had felt on the previous day, when they remembered how they had had the luck to find a Samiad, or sand fairy, and to receive its promise to grant them a new wish every day. For now they had 2 wishes, beauty. They had 2 wishes, beauty and wealth. And neither had made them exactly happy, but the happening of strange things, even if they are not completely pleasant things, is more amusing than those times when nothing happens but meals, and they are not always completely pleasant, especially on the days when it's cold mutton or hash. So they're probably thinking about, it's going to be boring now. Sorry, having a snack, a little bit of banana. And then we'll carry on reading. There was no chance of talking things over before breakfast because everyone overslept itself, as it happened, and it needed a vigorous and determined struggle to get dressed so as to be only 10 minutes late for breakfast. During this meal, some efforts were made to deal with the question of the Samiad in an impartial spirit. but it is very difficult to discuss anything thoroughly and at the same time to attend faithfully to your baby brother's breakfast needs. The baby was particularly lively that morning. He not only wriggled his body through the bar of his high chair and hung by his head, choking and purple, but he seized a teaspoon with desperate suddenness, hit Cyril heavily on the head with it, and then cried because it was taken away from him. He put his fat fist in his bread and milk and demanded nam, which was only allowed for tea, nam being jam. He sang, he put his feet on the table, he clamoured to go walkie. The conversation was something like this. Look here, about that sand fairy. Look out, he'll have the milk over. Milk removed to a safe distance. Yes, about that fairy. No, lamb dear, give Panther the naki boon. Then Cyril tried. Nothing we've had yet has turned out. He nearly had the mustard that time. I wonder whether we'd better wish... Hello, you've done it now, my boy. And in a flash of glass and pink baby paws, the bowl of golden carp in the middle of the table rolled on its side and poured a flood of mixed water and goldfish into the baby's lap and into the laps of the others. Why have they got a goldfish bowl in the middle of the dining table? Anyway, when the pool on the floor had been mopped up, everyone was almost as much upset as the goldfish, the lamb only remaining calm. When the pool on the floor had been mopped up and the leaping, gasping goldfish had been collected and put back in the water, the baby was taken away to be entirely redressed by Martha, and most of the others had to change completely because it was so messy and wet. The pinafores and jackets that had been bathed in goldfish and water were hung out to dry, and then it turned out that Jane must either mend the dress she had torn the day before or appear all day in her best petticoat. It was white and soft and frilly and trimmed with lace and very, very pretty, quite as pretty as a frock, if not more so, only it was not a frock. And Martha's word was law. She would not let Jane wear her best frock, and she refused to listen for a moment to Robert's suggestion that Jane should wear her best petticoat and call it a dress. It's not respectable, she said, and when people say that, it's no use anyone saying anything. You'll find this out for yourselves someday. So there was nothing for it but for Jane to mend her frock. The hole had been torn the day before when she happened to tumble down in the high street of Rochester, just where a water cart had passed on its silvery way. She had grazed her knee, and her stocking was much more grazed, and her dress was cut by the same stone which had attended to the knee and the stocking. Of course, the others were not such sneaks as to abandon a comrade in misfortune. So they all sat on the grass plot round the sundial, and Jane darned away for dear life. The lamb was still in the hands of Martha, having its clothes changed, so conversation was possible. Anthea and Robert timidly tried to conceal their innermost thought, which was that the Samoyed was not to be trusted. Interesting way of putting it. Just trying to find the right page for me to be on. Anyway, carrying on. So the discussion was that they thought that the Samoyed was not to be trusted. He's actually done exactly as they've asked. They just haven't realised that what they're asking for doesn't have the clarity and well thought outness that maybe it should. Maybe they're going to learn something from this. You never know with these ones, eh? Oh dear. They'll learn. I hope. Sorry, I'm trying to find something. Another something. I know, I already said that before. Right, got it. We shall carry on reading. The Samoyed was not to be trusted, in their opinion. Oh, I accidentally changed page. No wonder I couldn't find it. But Cyril said, "Speak out, say what you've got to say. I hate hinting and don't know in sneakish ways like that." So then Robert said, as in honour bound, "Sneak yourself, Anthea. Sneak yourself, Anthea and me weren't so goldfishy as you two were, so we got changed quicker and we've had time to think it over. And if you ask me, I didn't ask you, said Jane, biting off a needleful of thread as she had always been strictly forbidden to. Perhaps you don't know that if you bite off ends of cotton and swallow them, they wind tight around your heart and kill you. My nurse told me this. She told me also about the earth going round the sun. Now, what is one to believe, what with nurses and science? That's a different way of explaining it. Right, we'll carry on. I don't care who asks or who doesn't, said Robert, but Anthea and I think the Psammead is a spiteful brute. If it can give us our wishes, I suppose it can give itself its own, and I feel almost sure it wishes every time that our wishes shan't do us any good. Let's let the tiresome beast alone and just go and have a jolly good game of forts on our own in the chalk pit. You'll remember that the happily situated house where these children were spending their holidays lay between a chalk quarry and a gravel pit. There you go, that's what it was. Cyril and Jane were more hopeful. They generally were. I don't think the Psammead does it on purpose, Cyril said, and after all it was silly to wish for boundless wealth. £50 and 2-shilling pieces would have been much more sensible, and wishing to be beautiful as the day was simply donkey-ish. I don't want to be disagreeable, but it was. We must try to find a really useful wish and wish it. Jane dropped her work and said, I think so too. It's too silly to have a chance like this and not use it. I never heard of anyone else outside a book who had such a chance. There must be simply heaps of things we could wish for that wouldn't turn out Dead Sea fish like these two things have. Do let's think hard and wish something nice so that we can have a real jolly day, what there is left of it. Jane darned away like mad, for time was indeed getting on, and everyone began to talk at once. If you had been there, you could not possibly have made head or tail of the talk, but these children were used to talking by fours as soldiers march, and each of them could say what it had to say quite comfortably, and listen to the agreeable sound of its own voice, and at the same time have 3/4 of 2 sharp ears to spare for listening to what the others said. That is an easy example in multiplication of vulgar fractions, but as I dare say you can't do even that, I won't ask you to tell me whether 3/4 times 2 equals 1.5, but I will ask you to believe me that this was the amount of ear each child was able to lend to the others. Lending ears was common in Roman times, as we learn from Shakespeare, but I fear I am getting too instructive. That reference to the Roman times and Shakespeare was, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. It's the start of some famous speech in one of the Shakespearean plays. Anyway, when the frock was darned, the start for the gravel pit was delayed by Martha's insisting on everybody washing its hands, which was nonsense because nobody had been doing anything at all except Jane. And how can you get dirty doing nothing? That is a difficult question, and I cannot answer it on paper. In real life, I could very likely show you, or you me, which is much more likely. During the conversation in which the 6 ears were lent, there were 4 children, so that sum comes right, it had been decided that £50 in 2-shilling pieces was the right wish to have. And the lucky children who could have anything in the wide world just by wishing for it hurriedly started for the gravel pit to express their wishes to the Psammead. Martha caught them at the gate and insisted on their taking the baby with them. Oh dear, what's going to happen? The lucky children hurriedly started for the gravel pit. That's the caption under the picture, and here's the picture. The lucky children started for the gravel pit. And it looks like they are holding, there's the baby right there. Someone's holding the baby. Anyway, so there's your picture. Ha 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 ha. Got them to work. I'm so pleased. It's probably going to take a while again. Anyway. Not want him indeed. Why, everybody'd want him. A duck. With all their hearts they would. And you know you promised your ma to take him out every blessed day, said Martha. Martha's probably hoping to get some other things done and not have to worry about looking after the baby. Whoops, that was me turning me off. I'm still here, obviously. Turn off the picture one. Here we go. Martha's obviously got things that she'd like to get done that she can't do when she's looking after the baby. Just looking for what I need here. No, it won't let me do that there. I have to actually click the link. I'm just getting it ready for when I give you the next one. No, not that either. Yeah, one day I'll actually get myself sorted better than this. At least I'm happy that I can show you the pictures now, instead of promising to put them up in Discord and then not having them happen. Right, this picture you can't see yet, but I'll show it to you when we get there. We shall carry on with reading. You know you promised your ma to take him out every blessed day, said Martha. I know we did, said Robert in gloom, but I wish the lamb wasn't quite so young and small. It would be much better fun taking him out. He'll mend of his youngness with time, said Martha, and as for smallness, I don't think you'd fancy carrying of him any more, however big he was. Besides, he can walk a bit, bless his precious fat legs, a ducky. He feels the benefit of the new laid air. So he does. A pet. So she's one of these people who keeps on using terms of endearment when talking about babies and toddlers. With this and a kiss, she plumped the lamb into Anthea's arms and went back to make new pinafores on the sewing machine. She was a rapid performer on this instrument. So she's obviously learnt how to use a sewing machine, if they've got her in this book using a sewing machine. Now, I did actually find some information about when this book was written that I was going to tell you too. Try and remind me of that a bit later on. Sorry, I'm just trying to take a slice of banana without making a mess of my desk. Sorry. We'll give it a go. She was a rapid performer on this instrument, that's the sewing machine. The lamb laughed with pleasure and said, "Walk with Panty," and rode on Robert's back with yells of joy, and tried to feed Jane with stones, and altogether made himself so agreeable that nobody could long be sorry that he was of the party. I think Panty is the way he mispronounces Robert's name. The enthusiastic Jane even suggested that they should devote a week's wishes to assuring the baby's future by asking such gifts for him as the good fairies gave to infant princes in proper fairy tales. But Anthea, it might be Panty, Panty. Yeah, I think that's what it was. Sorry, it was only mentioned once at the beginning of the story, and I can't remember. But Anthea soberly reminded her that as the sand fairies' wishes only lasted till sunset, they could not ensure any benefit to the baby's later years, and Jane owned that it would be better to wish for £50 and 2-shilling pieces and buy the lamb a £3.15 rocking horse, like those in the big stores, with a part of the money. That's a thought. The coin that they gave to the Carter chap, it lasted. Why do you think that happened? Is it because they gave it away and it wasn't in their hands any longer that it stayed real? Interesting. Have to find that one out. That's an odd thing to have happened. It was settled that as soon as they had wished for the money and got it, they would get Mr. Crispin to drive them into Rochester again, taking Martha with them if they could not get out of taking her, and they would make a list of things they really wanted before they started. Full of high hopes and excellent resolutions, they went round the safe, slow cart road to the gravel pits. And as they went in between the mounds of gravel, a sudden thought came to them and would have turned their ruddy cheeks pale if they had been children in a book. Being real live children, it only made them stop and look at each other with rather blank and silly expressions, For now they remembered that yesterday, when they had asked the Samiad for boundless wealth, and it was getting ready to fill the quarry with the minted gold of bright guineas, millions of them, it had told the children to run along outside the quarry for fear they should be buried alive in the heavy, splendid treasure. And they had run, and so it happened that they had not had time to mark the spot where the Samiad was with a ring of stones as before, and it was this thought that put such silly expressions on their faces. "Never mind," said the hopeful Jane, "we'll soon find him." But this, though easily said, was hard in the doing. They looked, and though they found their seaside spades, nowhere could they find the sand fairy. At last they had to sit down and rest, not at all because they were weary or disheartened, of course, but because the lamb insisted on being put down, and you cannot look very carefully after anything you may have happened to lose in the sand if you have an active baby to look after. At the same time, get someone to drop your best knife in the sand next time you go to the seashore, and then take your baby brother with you when you go to look for it, and you will see that I am right. The lamb, as Martha had said, was feeling the benefit of the country air, and he was as frisky as a sandhopper. The elder ones longed to go on talking about the new wishes they would have when, or if, they found the Samiad again. But the lamb itself wished to enjoy himself. He watched his opportunity and threw a handful of sand into Anthea's face, then suddenly buried his own head in the sand and waved his fat legs in the air. Then, of course, the sand got into his eyes as it had into Anthea's, and he howled. The thoughtful Robert had brought one solid brown bottle of ginger beer with him, relying on a thirst that had never yet failed him. This had to be uncorked hurriedly. It was the only wet thing within reach, and it was necessary to wash the sand out of the lamb's eyes somehow. Of course, the ginger hurt horribly, and he howled more than ever, and amid his anguish of kicking, the bottle was upset and the beautiful ginger beer frothed out into the sand and was lost forever. It was then that Robert, usually a very patient brother, so far forgot himself as to say, "Anybody would want him indeed, only they don't. Martha doesn't, not really, or she'd jolly well keep him with her. He's a little nuisance, that's what he is. It's too bad. I only wish everybody did want him with all their hearts. We might get some peace in our lives." That word. The lamb stopped howling now because Jane had suddenly remembered there is only one safe way of taking things out of little children's eyes, and that is with your own soft, wet tongue. It's an old remedy. We don't do it these days because of our awareness of germs, but apparently it works. Also, your tongue is actually quite sensitive, so you could probably feel when you've got your tongue over a piece of sand. Anyway, it's quite easy if you love the baby as much as you ought to do. There you go. Then there was a little silence. Robert was not proud of himself for having been so cross, and the others were not proud of him either. You often notice that sort of silence when someone has said something it ought not to, and everyone else holds its tongue and waits for the one who oughtn't to have said it to say it was sorry. The silence was broken by a sigh. A breath suddenly let out. The children's heads turned as if there had been a string tied to each nose, and somebody had pulled all the strings at once. And everyone saw the sand fairy sitting quite close to them, with the expression which it used as a smile on its hairy face. "Good morning," it said. "I did that quite easily. Everyone wants him now." "It doesn't matter," said Robert sulkily, because he knew he had been behaving rather like a pig. "No matter who wants him, there's no one here to, anyhow." "Ingratitude," said the Samiad, "is a dreadful vice." "We're not ungrateful," Jane made haste to say, "but we didn't really want that wish. Robert only just said it. Can't you take it back and give us a new one?" "No, I can't," said the sand fairy shortly, chopping and changing. "It's not business. You ought to be careful what you do wish. There was a little boy once, he wished for a pliosaurus instead of an ichthyosaurus, because he was too lazy to remember the easy names of everyday things, and his father had been very vexed with him and made him go to bed before tea time and wouldn't let him go out in the nice flint boat along with the other children. It was the annual school treat day next day, and he came and flung himself down near me on the morning of the treat, and he kicked his little prehistoric legs about and said he wished he was dead. And of course, then he was. How awful, said all the children together. Only till sunset, of course, said the Samiad. Still, it was quite enough for his father and mother, and he caught it when he woke up, I tell you. He didn't turn to stone. I forget why. But there must have been some reason. They didn't know being dead is only being asleep, and that you're bound to wake up somewhere or other, either where you go to sleep or in some better place. You may be sure he caught it, giving them such a turn. Why, he wasn't allowed to taste megatherium for a month after that. Nothing but oysters and periwinkles and common things like that. All the children were quite crushed by this terrible tale. They looked at the Samiad in horror. Suddenly the lamb perceived that something brown and furry was near him. Poof, poof, poofy, he said, and made a grab. Here's the picture. Time for the picture. There he is. Poof, poof, poofy. Hang on, trying to get it so I can move it slightly so it's not behind the beam. There. Sorry, there. So there's the Samiad with his eyes on stalks and his long spidery arms. And then there's the kid. It's not a pussy, Anthea was beginning when the sand fairy leapt back. Oh, my left whisker, he said. It said, don't let him touch me, he's wet. Its fur stood on end with horror, and indeed a good deal of the ginger beer had been spilled on the blue smock of the lamb. The Samiad dug with its hands and feet and vanished in an instant and a whirl of sand. The children marked the spot with a ring of stones. We may as well get along home, said Robert. I'll say I'm sorry. But anyway, it's no good. If it's no good, it's no harm, and we know where the sandy thing is for tomorrow. The others were noble. No one reproached Robert at all. Cyril picked up the lamb, who was now quite himself again, and off they went by the safe cart road. The cart road from the gravel pits joins the road almost directly. At the gate into the road, the party stopped to shift the lamb from Cyril's back to Robert's, and as they paused, a very smart open carriage came in sight, with a coachman and a groom on the box, and inside the carriage a lady, very grand indeed. Sorry, I'm just having a quick preview in case I need to know. Okay, yes, sorted. A lady, very grand indeed, with a dress all white lace and red ribbons, and a parasol all red and white, and a white fluffy dog on her lap with a red ribbon round its neck. Sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once. A dog with a... Where's the dog? Oh, I need to find the line I got up to. A dog, a fluffy dog on her lap with a red ribbon round its neck. So she's really got a thing about red, hasn't she? She looked at the children, and particularly at the baby, and she smiled at him. The children were used to this. Don't forget, they've made this wish that everybody would like the baby. Oh dear. The children were used to this, for the lamb was, as all the servants said, a very taking child. So they waved their hands politely to the lady and expected her to drive on, but she did not. Instead, she made the coachman stop, and she beckoned to Cyril, and when he went up to the carriage, she said, "What a dear, darling duck of a baby! Oh, I should so like to adopt it. Do you think its mother would mind?" "She'd mind very much indeed," said Anthea shortly. "Oh, but I should like to bring it up in luxury, you know. I am Lady Chittenden. You must have seen my photograph in the illustrated papers. They call me a beauty, you know, but of course that's all nonsense. Anyway," she opened the carriage door and jumped out. She had the wonderfulest red high-heeled shoes with silver buckles. "Let me hold him a minute," she said, and she took the lamb and held him very awkwardly, as if she was not used to babies. Then suddenly she jumped into the carriage with the lamb in her arms, slammed the door and said, "Drive on!" She's kidnapped him. The lamb roared, the little white dog barked, and the coachman hesitated. "Drive on, I tell you," cried the lady, and the coachman did, for, as he said afterwards, it was just as much his place was worth not to. He'd lose his job if he didn't do as he's told. The 4 children looked at each other, and then with one accord they rushed after the carriage and held on behind. Down the dusty road went the smart carriage, and after it at double quick time ran the twinkling legs of the Lamb's brothers and sisters. And here you go. No. I thought I gave you the right one. Obviously not. We shall wait for the other one. Paste. Oh, yeah. Sorry. I didn't actually change the number that it was meant to be. No, I did the wrong one again. I shall turn the picture off for now. We'll try again with the right one. I hit the wrong button when I was typing in what it was meant to be. Oh my goodness, technology, eh? No, not that one. Just checking to see that I've got the right one now. And we shall get to the picture in a minute. There, that's the right one. So there's the lady in the carriage, and she's got the lamb in her hands, and the children are running along as fast as they can go behind the carriage. In the picture, they're actually holding on to, they've got their hands on the back of the carriage, trying to keep up. Hopefully they've found something to hold on to, so they've just got to keep their feet moving without it being quite so much effort. We'll see, won't we? Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Oh, dearie me. We'll see what happens next, shall we? See if I can get the next one ready beforehand. Right. The carriage went on, and the 8 feet that twinkled through the dust were growing quite stiff and tired before the carriage stopped at the lodge of a grand... Oh, hang on. I skipped a page. Sorry. Yes, I did say that it had turned over. The lamb howled louder and louder, but presently his howl was changed by slow degrees to hiccupy gurgles, and then all was still, and they knew he had gone to sleep. The carriage went on, and the 8 feet that twinkled through the dust were growing quite stiff and tired before the carriage stopped at the lodge of a grand park. The children crouched down behind the carriage, and the lady got out. She looked at the baby as it lay on the carriage seat and hesitated. "The darling, I won't disturb it," she said, and went into the lodge to talk to the woman there about a setting of eggs that had not turned out well. Not quite sure what that is. That may be hatching them. When your eggs are set under the chicken sets on them, as in it sits there but it stays there for a while, is my understanding of it from in the past. Anyway. The coachman and footman sprang from the box and leant over the sleeping lamb. "Fine boy. Wish he was mine," said the coachman. "He wouldn't favour you much," said the groom sourly. "Too handsome." The coachman pretended not to hear. He said, "Wonder at her now, I do really. Hates kids, got none of her own, and can't abide other folks's." The children, crouched in the white dust under the carriage, exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Tell you what," the coachman went on firmly, "blowed if I don't hide the little nipper in the hedge and tell her his brothers took him. Then I'll come back for him afterwards." "No, you don't," said the footman. "I've took to that kid so as never was. If anyone's to have him, it's me. So there." "Stop your talk," the coachman rejoined. "You don't want no kids, and if you did, one kid's the same as another to you. But I'm a married man and a judge of breed. I knows a first-rate yearling when I sees him. I'm a going to have him, and least said as soon as mended." "I should ha' thought," said the footman sneeringly, "you'd almost enough. What with Alfred and Albert and Louise and Victor Stanley and Elena Beatrice and another—" I'm thinking he's about to say another on the way. The coachman hit the footman in the chin. The footman hit the coachman in the waistcoat. The next minute the two were fighting here and there, in and out, up and down. Here's time for the picture. I'll just move it. No, thank you. I'll just... Okay. Try that again. I accidentally grabbed the overlay instead of the picture. No, wrong one again. Picture. Yes. Just trying to give you more of the picture. So there you go. The next minute, the two were fighting here and there, in and out, up and down, and all over, everywhere, and the little dog jumped on the box of the carriage and began barking like mad. Cyril, still crouching in the dust, waddled on bent legs to the side of the carriage furthest from the battlefield. He unfastened the door of the carriage. The two men were far too much occupied with their quarrel to notice anything, took the lamb in his arms, and still stooping, carried the sleeping baby a dozen yards along the road to where a stile led into a wood. The others followed, and there among the hazels and young oaks and sweet chestnuts covered by high, strong-scented brake fern, which I don't know what brake fern is, they all lay hidden till the angry voices of the men were hushed at the angry voice of the red and white lady, and after a long and anxious search, the carriage at last drove away. Because she was at the gatehouse, she's not gone up to her own large manor house yet. That's where she was going. My only hat, said Cyril, drawing a deep breath at the sound of as the sound of wheels at last died away. Everyone does want him now, and no mistake. That Samuel has done us again. Tricky brute. For any sake, let's get the kids safe home. So they peeped out, and finding on the right hand only lonely white road and nothing but lonely white road on the left, they took courage, and the road, Anthea carrying the sleepy lamb. Adventures dogged their footsteps. A boy with a bundle of faggots on his back dropped his bundle by the roadside and asked to look at the baby, and then offered to carry him. Faggots are pre-cut lengths of timber for firewood. They're not particularly thick, but that's what that type of bundle is called. That's also why there's a particular dish called faggots, where it's a bit like croquettes, like potato croquettes, where it's the vegetable is mashed up and put into this long rounded shape and then covered in crumbs. And those used to be called faggots because they were the same shape, where you have this length with a little bit of width and it's rounded all the way round, because it reminded everybody of seeing these bundles of wood being carried about as a wood supply system. Anyway, but Anthea was not to be caught that way twice. They all walked on, but the boy followed, and Cyril and Robert couldn't make him go away till they had more than once invited him to smell their fists. Afterwards, a little girl in a blue and white checked pinafore actually followed them for a quarter of a mile, crying for the precious baby, and then she was only got rid of by threats of tying her to a tree in the wood with all their pocket handkerchiefs, so that bears can come and eat you as soon as it gets dark, said Cyril severely. Then she went off crying. It presently seemed wise to the brothers and sisters of the baby, who was wanted by everyone, to hide in the hedge whenever they saw someone coming, and thus they managed to prevent the lamb from arousing the inconvenient affection of a milkman, a stone breaker, and a man who drove a cart with a paraffin barrel at the back of it. They were nearly home when the worst thing of all happened. Turning a corner, suddenly they came upon two vans, a tent, and a company of gypsies encamped by the side of the road. The vans were hung all round with wicker chairs and cradles and flower stands and feather brushes. A lot of ragged children were industriously making dust pies in the road. Two men lay on the grass smoking, and three women were doing the family washing in an old red watering can with the top broken off. In a moment, every gypsy, men, women, and children, surrounded Anthea and the baby. "Let me hold him, little lady," said one of the gypsy women, who had a mahogany-coloured face and dust-coloured hair. "I won't hurt a hair of his head, the little picture." "I'd rather not," said Anthea. "Let me have him," said the other woman, whose face was also the hue of mahogany, because they're out in the sun all day, they're well tanned, and her hair jet black with greasy curls. "I've 19 of my own, so I have." "No," said Anthea bravely, but her heart beat so that it nearly choked her. Then one of the men pushed forward. "So help me if it ain't," he cried, "my own long-lost child. Hey, have he a strawberry mark on his left ear? No, then he's my own babby, stolen from me in innocent infancy, and I'm over and him over, and we'll not have the law on you this, hand him over, and we'll not have the law on you this time. So he's claiming that it's his child that's been stolen. He snatched the baby from Anthea, who turned scarlet and burst into tears of pure rage. Oh, we've got a picture here. Is this... No, that's still the fighting one. The next one. This is the next one. Sorry, I'll get this going, and then I shall keep reading while it's doing its thinking about it stage. And burst into tears of pure rage. The others were standing quite still. This was much the most terrible thing that had ever happened to them. Even being taken up by the police in Rochester was nothing to this. Here we go. Here's the picture. There he is. He's talking to them and he's about to take the baby in that picture. Cyril was quite white and his hands trembled a little, but he made a sign to the others to shut up. He was silent a minute, thinking hard. Then he said, "We don't want to keep him if he's yours, but you see he's used to us. You shall have him if you want him." "Oh, no," cried Anthea, and Cyril glared at her. "Of course we want him," said the woman, trying to get the baby out of the man's arms. The lamb howled loudly. "Oh, he's hurt!" shrieked Anthea, and Cyril, in a savage undertone, bade her stop it. "You trust to me," he whispered. "Look here," he went on. "He's awfully tiresome with people he doesn't know very well. Suppose we stay here a bit till he gets used to you, and then when it's bedtime I give you my word of honour we'll go away and let you keep him if you want to. And then when we're done you can decide which of you is to have him when we're gone, as you'll all want him so much. As you all want him so much." "That's fair enough," said the man who was holding the baby, trying to loosen the red neckerchief, which the lamb had caught hold of and drawn round his mahogany throat so tight you could hardly... The child's reached up and grabbed the neckerchief, or it's like a handkerchief, but you tie it around his neck, which you can't quite see in that picture. Anyway, I'll turn that one off for now. The gypsies whispered together, and Cyril took the chance to whisper too. He said, "Sunset, we'll get away then." And then his brothers and sisters were filled with wonder and admiration at his having been so clever as to remember this. "Oh, do let him come to us," said Jane. "See, we'll sit down here and take care of him for you till he gets used to you." "What about dinner?" said Robert suddenly. The others looked at him with scorn. "Fancy bothering about your beastly dinner when when the baby," Jane whispered hotly. Robert carefully winked at her and went on. "You won't mind my just running home to get our dinner," he said to the gypsy. "I can bring it out here in a basket." Oh, so Robert's got a plan too. His brothers and sisters... That's right, they were nearly home. His brothers and sisters felt themselves very noble and despised him. They did not know his thoughtful, secret intention. But the gypsies did in a minute. "Oh, yes," they said, "and then fetch the police with a pack of lies about it being your baby instead of ours. Do you ever catch a weasel asleep?" they asked. "If you're hungry, you can pick a bit along of us," said the light-haired gypsy woman, not unkindly. "Here, Levi, that blessed kid'll howl his buttons off. Give him to the little lady, and let's see if they can't get him used to us a bit." So the lamb was handed back, but the gypsies crowded so closely that he could not possibly stop howling. Then the man with the red handkerchief said, "Here, Pharaoh, make up the fire, and you girls see to the pot. Give the kid a chance." So the gypsies, very much against their will, went off to their work, and the children and the lamb were left sitting on the grass. "He'll be all right at sunset," Jane whispered. "But oh, it is awful. Suppose they are frightfully angry when they come to their senses. They might beat us or leave us tied to trees or something." "No, they won't," Anthea said. "Oh, my lamb, don't cry any more. It's all right. Panty's got to, ducky," said Anthea. They aren't unkind people, or they wouldn't be going to give us any dinner." "Dinner?" said Robert. "I wouldn't touch their nasty dinner. It would choke me." The others thought so too then. But when the dinner was ready, it turned out to be supper, and happened between 4 and 5. They were all glad enough to take what they could get. It was boiled rabbit with onions and some bird rather like a chicken, but stringier about its legs and with a stronger taste. But the lamb had bread soaked in hot water and brown sugar sprinkled on top. He liked this very much, and consented to let the two gypsy women feed him with it, as he sat on Anthea's lap. All that long, hot afternoon, Robert and Cyril and Anthea and Jane had to keep the lamb amused and happy, while the gypsies looked eagerly on. By the time the shadows grew long and black across the meadows, he had really taken to the woman with the light hair, and even consented to kiss his hand to the children and to stand up and bow, like with his hand on his chest, like a gentleman. Sorry, I've got another picture coming up. I'm just going to see if I can get that ready for you. Like a bow with his hand on his chest, like a gentleman, to the two men. The whole gypsy camp was in raptures with him, and his brothers and sisters could not help taking some pleasure in showing off his accomplishments to an audience so interested and enthusiastic. But they longed for sunset. Here he is. He consented to let the two gypsy women feed him. There, see? And so you've got Anthea holding him. There's the baby, the lamb, and here's the two gypsy women. This is the one with the black hair, and this is the one with the lighter coloured hair. So they're feeding him. But they longed for sunset. We're getting into the habit of longing for sunset, Cyril whispered. Just checking to see if there's any more pictures. Cyril whispered, "How I do wish we could wish something really sensible that would be of some use, so that we should be quite sorry when sunset came." The shadows got longer and longer, and at last there were no separate shadows any more, but one soft, glowing shadow over everything, for the sun was out of sight behind the hill, but he had not really set yet. The people who make the laws about lighting bicycle lamps are the people who decide when the sun sets. She has to do it too, to the minute, or they would know the reason why. But the gypsies were getting impatient. "Now, young'uns," said the red handkerchief man said, "it's time you were laying of your heads on your pillows, so it is. The kid's all right and friendly with us now, so you just hand him over and get home like you said." The women and children came crowding round the lamb. Arms were held out, fingers snapped invitingly, friendly faces beaming with admiring smiles, but all failed to tempt the loyal lamb. He clung with arms and legs to Jane, who happened to be holding him, and uttered the gloomiest roar of the whole day. "It's no good," the woman said. "Hand the little poppet over, miss. We'll soon quiet him." And still the sun would not set. "Tell her about how to put him to bed," whispered Cyril. "Anything to gain time, and be ready to bolt when the sun really does make up a silly old mind to set." "Yes, I'll hand him over in just 1 minute," Anthea said, talking very fast. "But do let me just tell you he has a warm bath every night and cold in the morning, and he has a crockery rabbit to go into the warm bath with him, and little Samuel saying his prayers in white china on a red cushion for the cold bath. And he hates you to wash his ears, but you must, and if you let the soap get into his eyes, the lamb cries," said he. He had stopped roaring to listen. The woman laughed. "As if I hadn't never bathed a babby," she said. "Come, give us a hold of him. Come to Melia, my precious." "Gway, Ugsy," replied the lamb at once. "Yes, but," Anthea went on, "about his meals. You really must let him tell you he has an apple or a banana every morning, and bread and milk for breakfast, and an egg for his tea sometimes, and—" "I've brought up 10, said the black ringleted woman, "besides the others. Come, miss, and hand him over. I can't bear it no longer. I just must give him a hug. We ain't settled yet whose he is to be, Esther," said one of the men. "Won't be you, Esther, with 7 of 'em at your tail already." "I ain't so sure of that," said Esther's husband. "And ain't I." "Nobody to have a say neither," said the husband of Melia. Zillah, the girl, said, "And me? I'm a single girl and no one but him to look after. I ought to have him." "Hold your tongue." "Shut your mouth." Don't you show me no more of your impertinence. Everyone was getting angry. Oh dear. The dark gypsy faces were frowning and anxious looking. Suddenly, a change swept over them, as if some invisible sponge had wiped away these cross and anxious expressions and left only a blank. The children saw the sun really had set, but they were afraid to move, and the gypsies were feeling so muddled because of the invisible sponge that had washed away all the feelings of the last few hours out of their hearts that they could not say a word. The children hardly dared breathe. Suppose the gypsies, when they recovered speech, should be furious to think how silly they had been all day. It was an awkward moment. Suddenly, Anthea, greatly daring, held out the lamb to the red handkerchief man. "Here he is," she said. The man drew back. "I shouldn't like to deprive you, miss," he said hoarsely. "Anyone who likes can have my share of him," said the other man. "After all, I've got enough of my own," said Esther. "He's a nice little chap, though," said Amelia. She was the only one who now looked affectionately at the whimpering lamb. Zillah said, "If I don't think I must have had a touch of the sun. I don't want him." "Then shall we take him away?" said Anthea. "Well, suppose you do," said Pharaoh heartily, "and we'll say no more about it." And with great haste, all the gypsies began to be busy about their tents for the night. All but Amelia. She went with the children as far as the bend in the road, and there she said, "Let me give him a kiss, miss. I don't know what made us go to behave so silly. Us gypsies don't steal babies, whatever they may tell you when you're naughty, but we've enough of our own mostly. But I've lost all mine." She leaned towards the lamb, and he, looking in her eyes, unexpectedly put up a grubby, soft paw and stroked her face. "Poor paw," said the lamb, and he let the gypsy woman kiss him, and what is more, he kissed her brown cheek in return. A very nice kiss, as all his kisses are, and not a wet one like some babies give. The gypsy woman moved her finger about on his forehead, as if she had been writing something there, and the same with his chest and his hands and his feet. Then she said, "May he be brave, and have the strong head to think with, and the strong heart to love with, and the strong arms to work with, and the strong feet to travel with, and always come home safe to his own." Then she said something in a strange language no one could understand, and suddenly added, "Well, I must be saying so long, and glad to have made your acquaintance," and she turned and went back to her home, the tent by the grassy roadside. She'd just given him a blessing. That's lovely. The children looked after her till she was out of sight. Then Robert said, "How silly of her. Even sunset didn't put her right. What rot she talked." "Well," said Cyril, "if you ask me, I think it was rather decent of her." "Decent," said Anthea. "It was very nice indeed of her. I think she's a dear." "She's just too frightfully nice for anything," said Jane. And they went home, very late for tea, and unspeakably late for dinner. Martha scolded, of course, but the lamb was safe. "I say, it turned out we wanted the lamb as much as anyone," said Robert later. "Of course. But do you feel different about it now the sun's set?" "No," said all the others together. "Then it's lasted over sunset with us." "No, it hasn't," Cyril explained. "The wish didn't do anything to us. We always wanted him with all our hearts when we were our proper selves, only we were all pigs this morning, especially you, Robert." Robert bore this much with a strange calm. "I certainly thought I didn't want him this morning," said he. "Perhaps I was a pig, but everything looked so different when we thought we were going to lose him. And that, my dear children, is the moral of this chapter. I did not mean it to have a moral, but morals are nasty forward beings and will keep putting in their oars where they are not wanted. And since the moral has crept in quite against my wishes, you might as well think of it next time you feel piggy yourself and want to get rid of any of your brothers and sisters. I hope this doesn't often happen, but I dare say it has happened sometimes, even to you." And I'm going to finish there. And today's reading took quite a lot longer with me fluffing around trying to get those photos working and everything else. Anyway, we'll see you next time. In the meantime, happy imaginings, happy stories, and may you have a great period of time between now and next time we meet.